Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Mr. Jono, and we're back today together to work on another virtual lesson. Today, we are going to study aerial perspective, but before I get into that, I want to remind you a little bit about myself and a little bit about what we've been doing over the past lessons. So, again, my name is Mr. Jono. I've been a artist in New Orleans for over 10 years now. I specialize in printmaking and painting. All of my work is abstract. I show in some galleries across town. I show online on other websites. I'm always doing what I can do to be a part of our creative community here in New Orleans. So, with that being said, let's talk about the previous lessons and what we have done in the past and make sure we kind of refresh our minds for that so we can be focused on today's lesson. So if you remember at the very beginning, we did a couple perspective lessons on 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective. And then after that, we did a lesson on value range and shading. So both of those techniques are ways that we can make a three-dimensional object, or I should say we can create a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface, such as a piece of paper. So now today we're going to kind of put all of that knowledge together from all of the 1, 2, and 3-point perspective, and all the knowledge from our value range and our value scale, and we're going to combine those to create aerial perspective. Now, just like all my videos, aerial perspective can be studied by people of all ages. It doesn't matter how old or young you are, it just takes a little focus and a little concentration. But because this is a little bit more sophisticated technique, because it kind of combines a few different things all into one, we really want this lesson to focus on students in 4th through 8th grade. So we're a little bit older, heading into the middle school range, but again, we're not going to do anything today that a 3rd grader or a 9th grader wouldn't be able to understand. So, follow closely. I'll work slowly. I'll repeat some things that need to be repeated. And if you ever have to take a break and study what we just did, just push that pause button and take as much time as you need. So now let's all get ready to get in a frame of creative mind. We want to take a couple deep breaths. We want to think about all the creative ideas that we might have thought about yesterday and last night. And most importantly, we want to wash our hands. So we're still in this new way of life where we've got to wash our hands every day. We got to take care of ourselves. And just like I mentioned in the last video, if you're going to go outside or you're going to go to the grocery store, you're going to go walk down the street, it might be a good idea to cover your face. You can see I got this really cool Bayou Boogaloo face mask. I got it the other day. I love it. It is very cool. It makes me look good, and it keeps me and everyone around me safe. So if you'll do those two things, you'll cover your mouth and you'll wash your hands, we'll be all on the fast track to safety. Okay, everyone. So what is aerial perspective? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to read this definition that I have written down over here, and then I'm going to kind of simplify that in hopes that we'll all understand it, okay? So let me read this to you right here. Aerial perspective is also known as atmospheric perspective. It refers to the effect that the atmosphere has on appearance of an object as it is viewed from a distance. So how does the atmosphere affect what we're looking at relative to where it is in your eyesight? Is it close to us? Is it way back in the horizon line? That's what that statement's saying. So let's continue on. As the distance between an object and a viewer increases, that means as the distance gets further away, the contrast between the object and its background decreases, and the contrast of any markings or details within the object also decreases. The colors of this object are also become less saturated and shift towards the background color, which is usually a blue, but under some conditions, maybe some other color. The reason they're saying it's a blue is because traditionally when we look out in the distance, the sky is so vast that it makes everything look blue, like the Blue Ridge Mountains of Kentucky and Tennessee, for example. So what this definition is saying is that when we look at something, whether it's a mountain, whether it's a building, whether it's a tree, the closer it is to us, the more detail and the more contrast that object has. The further away the further away the object is from us, the less contrast and the less saturation that object has. Okay? So once again, if it's up close to us, it's very detailed, the contrast is very high. If it's far away from us, it's very blurry, and we can't really tell where the lines begin and end, okay? Everyone understand that? So that's aerial perspective. And the way that we draw that, the way that we show that on a piece of paper is not only with perspective, but also with value and shading and tone. Those are all the things that we learned last week in our value scale lesson. So once again, we're going to be combining perspective and value range to create aerial or atmospheric perspective, okay? So in today's lessons, we're going to start out very, very simple. We're not even going to use 2- and 3-point perspective. We might not even use 1-point perspective. We're just going to draw some shapes. We're going to color the close shapes to us very dark and the far away shapes to us very light. And so we can start to get an understanding of exactly what aerial perspective is. So you might be asking yourself, this is perfect. I love this. What do we need? Well, the cool thing about all these lessons I tell you every week is that all you need are the same things that we needed the week before. We needed a big old piece of paper back here. If you have a small sheet of paper like this size, that's no problem. You can use that. So we need a big sheet of paper. We need a pencil. I'm going to use a Sharpie so people can see. We need an eraser in case we make a mistake. And we need a ruler. Now this time, we might not even actually need the ruler. We're going to be doing some organic shapes like mountains and trees. And yeah, we might draw a building here and there, but you might not even really need the ruler. So keep it handy just in case. And if you don't have a ruler, don't even worry, because everything that we learned together does not require a ruler. Life is just a little bit easier with a ruler. Now I'm looking over here and I see that I had some examples of aerial perspective, and I forgot to show you when I was going over the definition. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then we'll go over a couple vocabulary words, and then we'll start our demo, okay? All right. So like I said, aerial perspective is drawing objects that are close up, very dark in contrast. It has a lot of contrast, and objects that are far away have very little contrast. So you can see this is just a simple mountain range. You can see this mountain is way up close, it's the darkest, and then it gradually gets lighter and lighter. And so what that's suggesting is that this mountain that's way back in the background, it's so far away that it kind of blends in with its atmosphere, with the sky, and with its surroundings. Now, this is a black and white image, so it's hard to see that, but that's the reason why it goes from dark to light. So this is our closest up area, and this is our furthest away area, okay? So this is a really simple drawing of it, and we might start with this in a few minutes. We'll see. So here it is, a little bit more detailed. You can see the trees in the foreground, and then you can see the mountains get lighter as it goes further away, okay? So take a look at that, research or study that for a couple seconds, and then we'll move on to a different image. And this image is a little bit more detailed, a little bit more, I don't know if complicated is the right word, but it's definitely busier. So here it is with a cityscape. So we've got these buildings. They look like towers in the roof of different buildings. We have a very up close version. You see how the detail, the highlights, and the shadows are showing through. This part of the drawing is very detailed. And then the next layer is pretty detailed, but it's not quite. It's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more confusing what's going on, but you still understand. Then the far layer, the furthest away layer, has the least amount of contrast, and it's really just shapes of buildings and so forth. So there's hardly any detail at all in that. So check that out. All right, so those are a couple examples, and now we can move on to doing some drawing. So you can see behind me, I've made a list of vocabulary words. In a second, I'll get out of the way so we can read them. How many do we have? We have about 5 or 6 of them. A couple of them we've already gone over in past lessons, but you know how it goes. It's always a good idea to review. So let's go over these definitions, and then after that, we'll be ready to start drawing. So our first, I'm going to get out of the way. Our first word is form. All right? Can you see this? Form. Form is an element of art. So there's 6 elements, or maybe 7. I can't remember off the top of my head. 7 elements of art. Those are just different techniques and different ideas that help create beautiful art. And form is one of them. And when we talk about form, all form is the shape of an object. So if you remember in one of our, I believe it was 2-point perspective, in our perspective video, we talked about form for the very first time. So it's just whatever you're drawing. In that case, it was a box. In today's case, it might be a building or a mountain. Form is just the shape of whatever you're drawing. The next one is another one that we've gone over before. Contrast. Contrast is a difference between lights and darks. So if you have a circle on your piece of paper that's completely dark and it's 100% black and it's the darkest you can ever get, and then right next to it you have the whitest white of a circle you've ever seen in your life. And so you have a dark dot and a light dot, and you put those together and you're looking at them, and the difference between those 2 colors is the contrast. So if you raise the contrast, that means there's a big difference between light and dark, and if you lower the contrast, there's hardly any difference between light and dark. So how does that apply to aerial perspective? Well, if you remember in the beginning, I said that the darker images are the ones that are up front with a lot of detail, and the further away you go, the lighter that image gets. The further away you go, that is, and lightness is the contrast. So the next one is tone. Tone is the degree of lightness or darkness that you're shading or coloring. So this green shirt of mine, this is a specific tone. You know, if you go outside, you'll see a really dark green, or you might see a really light green. Those are different tones. So, you know, it's just each degree of shading creates a different tone. The next word is illusion. So that's a word that we use every day in all kinds of different conversations and all kinds of different backdrops and at different jobs and professions, and you know it's a word we use all the time. It means to falsely perceive or create. So in our case, in art, we're going to create the illusion of distance by using different tones and contrast. So we're going to draw one way to make the viewer think a different way. That's creating an illusion. It's kind of like a magic trick if you really think about it. The last word is shadow. Shadow is, I mean, we kind of know what a shadow is, right? You could probably look on the floor right now and find a shadow. I'm looking at one right there. The shadow is just darkness cast upon a surface from a light source. So, like I said, if we're all walking down the street and the sun is beating down on us and it's hitting us on this side of the face, well, this side of the face is creating a shadow that you could probably turn around and look and see on the ground. So, these are our 5 words: form, contrast, tone, illusion, and shadow. All right? So I'm going to bring this closer so you can take a look. There we go. Read over that for a little while. Okay. If you need more time, remember you can always push the pause button and write these down or review them at your own pace. Take all the time you need. So, with that being said, be sure that you got your paper and your marker or pencil and ruler and eraser. Get all that together, lay your piece of paper down, put all your materials right next to you, and get ready to draw. Okay, so now we're ready to draw. So we're going to start off by kind of dividing the paper in half. And I'm going to do most of my drawing with a Sharpie so you can see because I'm kind of far away. But I'm going to do some of the drawing in pencil because we're going to be drawing all these guidelines, and I don't want to be able to erase them basically. So if you can't see what I'm drawing, I'll try to give you a close-up view, but don't worry, at the end everything's going to be drawn in black and you'll be able to see everything just fine. So now that we have our sheet of paper, you can turn it any way that you want. I decided to go vertical. I'm going to take my pencil and we're going to just draw a line to kind of slice the paper in half. So just draw a line halfway through the paper like this. Yeah, that's pretty hard to see, but I just kind of did it really lightly. Can you even see that? And in hopes that I'll be able to erase them in a little while. So draw a line halfway through your paper, and then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start building. So what this line kind of indicates, this is not a horizon line, but it's acting like a horizon line. It's in the sense that the sky is going to be up here and the ground is going to be down here. So let's start with the ground, okay? I'm going to draw my first layer. So we're going to draw 3 different layers right here and 3 different layers in the sky. First layer is going to be, we'll do a couple buildings. So I would say if you have your sheet of paper, we'd make our first layer about 1/3 of that bottom size. So I'm going to draw it in pencil, and then I'll draw in Sharpie so you can see a little bit better. So, you know, we're just gonna kind of make it up as we go along. We don't really have a game plan. I'm gonna maybe draw one little roof this way, maybe with like a little chimney coming down like that. And remember, it doesn't have to be very detailed at all. So I've got one right there, and then maybe the next one kind of comes this way, and it goes up like this, and comes all the way down, and then we have a small one right here, and maybe there's a chimney right here as well. Okay, so I really like that, so what I'm going to do is draw that in Sharpie so you'll be able to see it. Okay, so there you go. There's our first layer, okay? Now, the second layer, I'm going to kind of switch over and draw some mountains. So I'm going to do the same thing. Draw with my pencil first. And don't make it too big because we're going to add something on top of that. We're going to add another layer. So make it not, medium size. Okay, here we go. I'll draw this again. All right, there you go. So that's not my best mountain range, but I'll try to do better next time. All right, now we're going to draw one more. And I made a point of going above the dotted line because I want you to know that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be everything below our guideline. If it goes a little bit above the guideline, that's okay. It doesn't matter. We're all just being creative here. Okay. Maybe we'll do this one too. All right. So now you can see, look, we've got 3 kind of layers of art going on. We have our buildings, we have 1 mountain, we have 2 mountains. And we're going to kind of do the same thing with the sky as well. So one thing that I forgot to mention is that we are eventually going to add some smoke coming out of these chimneys to kind of help create that illusion of depth that we're working on right now. So first things first is, now that we've got our 3 mountains, we want to draw 3 different layers of clouds. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to draw a squiggly line from one side to the other, and that's going to kind of represent our first layer of clouds. So watch, it's going to go like this. Yeah. All right. So you did that one there, and then I'm going to do another one like that, and then I'm going to do a third one like that. So now you can see I've got 3 different layers. 1, 2, 3. Really, I created 4 different layers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Doesn't really matter how many layers that you create. It just matters that you're creating. So one thing that we can do, since this is our buildings are in the foreground, what we want to do with that smoke is we want to create some smoke coming out of these chimneys, and we want to connect it to one of our clouds, and that will kind of bring that cloud forward and push everything else back. And the reason it brings that cloud forward is because this image is already in the foreground. So if we can kind of connect this foreground with a foreground here, then that really kind of starts to solidify the act of creating this aerial perspective. So we're going to do this right here. And this one I'm just kind of running off the page. So now I know we got some kind of squiggly lines here, but I'm going to outline them. All right, so that's kind of hard to see, but we should be able to do it. So you see how we've got our smoke kind of comes over here. This kind of has its own smoke stream, and then this smoke comes in front of everything else and then grabs this area and kind of pulls it forward. So now one thing that we can do is color these shapes in, and we'll be able to see more effectively that representation of aerial perspective. So I'm going to take a time out for a second and do a little coloring, and when I come back, I'm going to show you where and how I colored, or shaded, I should say, and you'll be able to do the same thing, and then everyone will understand aerial perspective. So give me a couple minutes, I'll be right back. Voila! Here is our same drawing, just colored in using the information that we just learned about aerial perspective, which is dark contrast at the foreground, and it progressively gets lighter. So what you have here is our buildings are completely black with 2 smoke streams. Then the mountains behind are very dark but a little bit lighter, and then these mountains are very dark. These mountains are a little bit lighter than the previous, and then we have up here a very light mountain range as well. And then our sky is, we have very dark sky at the bottom. It gets a little bit lighter at the top, and then I left our smoke and our cloud white to show that that's at the forefront. So take a look. I'll move this closer so you can see. It's the whole drawing. You can see how basically it gets darker at the front and lighter in the back. That's the main thing we want to take away from this lesson. Okay? All right. So with that in mind, let's take a minute to just kind of review and maybe ask ourselves a couple questions about our lesson. So, and I'm going to leave this drawing up in the background. Maybe that'll kind of spark an idea or a problem or anything that you had that you'd like to talk about. So, were we able to explore various tones in order to suggest aerial perspective? Were you able to understand that The images in the foreground need to be dark, and the images in the background need to be light. Are you able to apply the vocabulary to your studies? Did you understand what form and contrast and illusion mean? What about shadow and tone? And if I ask you to define those words, or your friend uses one of those words in a sentence, do you understand what's being asked of you? Do you understand what's being said? If you need to, you can rewind this video and take another look at the vocabulary words. You can do that in all of my videos. It's very important that you learn these words not only in art, but for life as well. A lot of these words that we learned in art classes actually apply to everyday life. It applies to your other studies, it applies to your home, it applies to your friends and your family. So it's always a good idea to learn at least one new vocabulary word a day. I mean, that's not that hard, right? So, did you have any problems with the demo? Did I confuse you in any way? Did I talk too fast? Could you not see my drawing? Are you confused at why this is dark and this is light, or why is it dark up here too? And what are those questions that you ask yourself because you were struggling, or maybe you didn't have any questions? You understood everything. Which one is that? I'd like to know either way. Do you understand shading and tone and contrast and detail and how all that applies to art? Those are basically our vocabulary words, but did you understand how the actions of these words apply to art? Can you use tone in a different drawing? Can you explain to your brother or sister what perspective is? Hopefully you've learned how to do those things over this video in the past few weeks. Are you able to connect this lesson with a previous lesson of shading and perspective? Do you understand that these are all building on top of each other, and it's important to have a really good foundation, and it's important to understand last week's video so we can understand this week's video. That was, I don't know, 4 or 5 questions that I came up with that I'd like for you to ask yourself. And if you have responses to those questions, or if you have questions yourself, or you want to share some knowledge, send us an email and we'll get back to you. That's all you have to do. And I look forward to seeing those emails every week, every day sometimes, and hopefully we'll have hopefully most people understood what we did today, and you just have some additional knowledge that you want to share. But if you are a little confused and have a question, let me know. I'll fix it for you. So, and that's our lesson today on aerial perspective. Glad you're with me today. Remember, now that we're done drawing, it'd be a good idea to go wash those hands and get on with whatever the next part of your day is. I appreciate you joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.